Hello and welcome to the first of a series of inclusive design webinars Motionspot is running between now and Christmas. I'm Ed Warner, founder and CEO of the accessible design business Motionspot. I'm also the government sector champion for the design of accessible products and spaces. So I'm absolutely delighted to be hosting this webinar today. I just wanted to start with a bit of housekeeping. We've had a number of registrants for this webinar from around the world, and I'm conscious it's 11 o'clock on a UK morning. So many people in the US won't be seeing this until it's recorded. So we are recording this session and the video will be sent to all registrants over the coming days. The idea today is to present for around 30 to 35 minutes. And then I'm going to open up a panel discussion with our panelists today. So I'd really encourage you to ask any questions in the chat box as the presentation goes on, and please ask questions at the end, which I'm really happy to field to all of our panelists, whom I think I'll introduce at this point. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Paul Bayliss to the panel. Paul is the General Manager of Hotel Brooklyn in Manchester. Prior to opening Hotel Brooklyn, Paul was Managing Director of McDonald's Hotels Highland Division. He's been General Manager at Cheshire's Carden Park Hotel and has had over 24 years in the British Army in positions ranging from apprentice chef to commissioned officer. Paul is a multi-award winner, including UK Independent Hotelier of the Year, Hotel of the Year, and most recently, Accessible Hotel of the Year. He was awarded an MBE for his services to hospitality in 2006, and he'll be answering questions specifically around Hotel Brooklyn in our Q&A at the end. I'm also joined by Becky Storey, Senior Inclusive Designer at Motionspot. Becky is an experienced designer with a passion for creative, inclusive spaces. At Motionspot, she's worked with a range of commercial clients to help redesign their environments so they're accessible and inclusive for everyone. And finally, I'd like to introduce Rebecca Hillier. Rebecca is one of Motionspot's senior account managers and has extensive experience supporting clients through all stages of the accessible design project, particularly around the specification of products to suit a client's budget and design intent. Panelists, thank you and welcome. If it's okay, I'd just ask if you can turn off your videos and we'll just have whoever's presenting on the screen, and I'll call you back just for Q&A at the end, if that's okay. Before we get into the presentation today, I just wanted to take a few minutes to set the scene for our discussion and to give you a bit of background as to why we're so passionate about this area. Motionspot was founded and inspired by the personal experience of our co-founder, James Taylor, pictured here on the left, who sadly suffered a spinal cord injury in a diving accident aged 25. After 8 months in Stoke Mandeville Hospital, James returned home to his flat in Battersea, South London, to find it looking more like a clinical care home, full of all the products that are often so synonymous with ageing and disability. And it was something he said to me over dinner in 2011, which still very much resonates with me and the team today. And he said, every morning I wake up and I'm reminded of my condition because the product's around me. And I'm a big believer that if you get the environment right for people, you can really positively impact their cognitive and physical health. So together, James and I launched Motionspot almost 10 years ago now. And since then, we built a really talented team of designers, access specialists, occupational therapists, and product designers, who are all experts in the field of accessibility. They're all experts in building codes and regulations, but ultimately they're all designers at heart. And we don't want anything leaving our design studio without us wanting the product or service in our own homes or lives. And really central to our design process is what we call evidence-based design thinking. So on all of the projects we work on, we take global best practice and academic research, and we pair that with our own designers' knowledge and experience of what works. But really importantly, we talk to the people who are ultimately going to be using these spaces. And that's what is so often forgotten on design projects. And I'd urge that any project that you're looking at, either now or in the future, really involves the people who are using those spaces. Over the last 10 years, we've been lucky enough to work with some amazing hospitality clients, both big and small. And we're going to be drawing on examples from these clients during this presentation. Why are we looking at this today? Well, we know that COVID has absolutely decimated the hospitality sector over the last 18 months. And as hotels now begin to open up, the true winners are going to be those that really focus on the customer and the experience that the customer has within their hotels. For us, when we talk about customer, we talk about the 14 million disabled people in the UK who are spending almost £12.5 billion a year on a trip where at least one of the travelling party has a disability. This is obviously an enormous market for UK hotels, but it's only a market that will be unlocked if they can be looking at how they can design more accessible accommodation. For too long, disabled people have had to put up with second-class facilities in hotels. And if you take anything away today, I hope you'll take some inspiration as to what's possible when designing really beautiful, accessible hotels that are open and appealing to all. I'm going to hand over to Becky, who's going to explain some of the principles around the accessible design process, but also talk about who we're designing for. Becky, over to you.
Thanks, Ed. Hi. So yeah, I'm gonna talk through some of the key things to consider when designing for hotels, thinking about inclusive design and the principles that come alongside with that. So when we are designing inclusively, I guess kind of to start with, why is it important? Well, we can't assume who is going to walk through the door of a hotel. It's important that we consider as many people as possible. When we think about the fact that 1 in 4 people living in the UK have a disability that limits their day-to-day activities, it's really important to think about what design features can we put in place that's going to help make their experience more enjoyable and more memorable in a positive way. Something that we find really helpful as a team to think about is considering that people have different experiences day to day, and that we can all come into contact with an environment that's disabling for us. And we like to think about it as the environment that can disable us, and not the person who is being disabled, and focusing on that. So some examples is thinking about kind of it as a permanent, temporary, or situational circumstance. And so, for example, someone with a permanent disability, maybe someone who is deaf, and so communication and hearing is more challenging. So thinking about how we can design around other senses so that they can experience that space. A temporary disability might look like someone has a sore throat and is struggling to communicate more clearly. And a situational disability could be someone who is holding something in their hands whilst they're also trying to navigate opening a door. So these are kind of things that put us in place of someone who might be experiencing disability every day. And then how do we go about designing inclusively? Because it can feel like a minefield at times. And something that is quite helpful is to break it down into separate kind of chunks, as you like. So thinking about the different components that come together to make a space more inclusive. An example is around materiality. So what are the finishes like in a space? Thinking about slip resistance, thinking about how all those materials play together to communicate what a space looks like, sounds like, feels like. When we're thinking around seating, for example, so furniture, this lends more thinking around physical experience in a space. So is there a number of seating options? Does furniture contrast well against the floor? Is it comfortable? Are there different heights? Are there different supportive seating? We're looking at things that kind of give option. And then also another example, when we're thinking around kind of beyond physical kind of design considerations, thinking around neurodiversity. So every single person will experience a space differently. And so how can we accommodate the different ways someone kind of processes a space? So a loud space might be exciting for some people, but might also be overwhelming for others. So the journey itself starts from outside a building, outside of a space. But then some of the principles that we're considering as you enter the space are, for example, the door. We generally promote an option that is inclusive for everyone. So one way of entering a building for everyone, thinking about items that can be memorable. So for example, the bottom picture of the car outside Hotel Brooklyn, it's a memorable feature that someone can navigate towards from a distance. Doors that open automatically rather than having to have a manual operation, like a revolving door, which can be challenging, not just for physical reasons, but also for someone with a visual impairment as well. Actually entering the building, some of the obvious may seem like level access, which is obviously very important for actually entering a space if you are a wheelchair user, for example. But also some other things to consider is the transition from outside the building into the lobby of a hotel, for example. And so where you get kind of a clear contrast of dark to light, for some people, processing that information can appear to be a step or a change in level, as well as someone who, for example, is neurodivergent, so they're processing information in a different way. A pattern on the floor or in a large surface area can be quite challenging to their eye and quite confusing, and can be kind of a factor that leads to sensory overload. So they're processing a lot of information that is overwhelming one particular sense. So thinking about the floor transition, avoiding sharp contrast and creating as much as a smooth transition as possible. The lobby area, so again, this is going to be a point where someone arrives into a building. It may be busy, it may be hard to know where to go if you're unfamiliar with that space. So some things that are really important are, for example, the finishes, thinking about good definition of walls to floor, where possible, avoiding using shiny or kind of gloss finishes on large surface areas, because these can reflect light and they can distort the shape of the space for someone with a visual impairment or a cognitive impairment, as well as using clear signage, so identifying where someone is as soon as they arrive into the building, so that they know where do they go to reception, where do they go to the lifts. That can also be really helpful. Use of colour, this is a really helpful way to communicate a space, and it's an addition to wayfinding, so it supports signage in a really helpful way. Colour is a really good way of associating a space and planting that space in your memory. So for example, a blue room, let's head to the blue room. It kind of naturally rolls off the tongue, and it's easy to kind of stick in someone's mind. Where we use colour is to help kind of highlight a space. So around a door frame, for example, this can help someone navigate towards that. It can help to define the entrance. We also use it as well to create a contrast between walls and floors. So if a wall and a floor has a different colour and it contrasts with a high light reflectant value, then that helps to define the space, so someone can tell where does the floor finish, where does the wall finish, and navigate and understand the space more clearly. It can also be used as a really helpful way to hide information as well. So for example, the image on the right, that's a good way of then saying this space is off bounds, so it's not for entrance. So it can be a helpful way to communicate where to go and where not to go as well. And so navigation and wayfinding, it is more than just signage and clear signage, because we have to remember as well, for some people, if they're visiting a hotel, English may not be their first language. So how else are we using the space to communicate how to get around? And so some of the things obviously which I mentioned around colour, but also it's around familiarity, an intuitive space, and something, you know, and features that communicate the shape and the size of that space. It's also really important that we represent function in wayfinding as well. So this image, some of the things that could be quite confusing for someone with a visual impairment or with a cognitive impairment is that there's no clear signage here of what lies beyond the door. The doors are reflective and they make the room seem bigger than it is, as well as the light is also reflecting off the doors. So for someone who's not familiar with this space, it could be really difficult to understand what actually is this space used for. And we may interpret, oh, it's used for a toilet, but that may not be clear for everybody. So navigation and wayfinding is around helping people to confidently move through a space without them really having to think twice about how they're getting from A to B. And this leads us really nicely onto the Hotel Brooklyn in Manchester. So Hotel Brooklyn is a project that Motionspot were commissioned to work with the design team on and help to shape their inclusive design across 18 bedrooms and bathrooms. It won an award very recently, as Ed mentioned, for Accessible Hotel of the Year at the Katie's, and has really kind of gone above and beyond the standards of access, particularly around designing for the hospitality sector. I'd love to just kind of talk through some of the things that have been considered at Hotel Brooklyn, just to see how the items that I was just talking about, the principles, kind of come into play in their own in the actual space. So some of the things that have been considered, for example, in the reception, are really good circulation space. There's a lowered desk as well, which provides a nice inclusive space for someone in a wheelchair to come and speak to staff as they arrive and not have to kind of feel like they are peering up to somebody else. So having good lighting throughout as well and good biophilia in the space helps to promote well-being and generally kind of keeping the space as a welcoming environment. In the communal areas, again, we've incorporated some really good lighting, which helps to provide clarity of the space. So this not only helps someone to navigate well through a space, but also helps for anyone who, for example, is lip reading. There's good definition and good clarity on their face so that they can communicate easily. The partitions on the left image just offer a bit of more of a kind of a safe feeling. So in an open space, some people with sensory processing differences can find it quite anxiety driving if there's people passing behind them and they're unsure of kind of who's approaching behind them. So having a way of kind of positioning yourself against a wall or in kind of a nice more secluded area can feel more comfortable. There's a good variety of seating options, so thinking about different heights of seating for people who have different physical needs, but also those who may have a back condition who prefer to stand or prefer to perch. There's a variety there. And something as well which when we're thinking around the kind of operational side of hotels, Hotel Brooklyn itself also offers a wide range for dietary requirements as well. So it's understanding that not everyone has the same taste in food, but also like some people may need assistance with that food being prepared for them in a certain way so they can eat it more easily rather than having to use the complication of kind of cutting food and everything up. So those sort of things have been thought about prior to someone arriving. Within the bedroom, so the accessible bedrooms at Hotel Brooklyn have zip and link beds. So these beds can be separated. For example, if someone is arriving with a carer, but they don't necessarily share a bed, the beds can be separated to accommodate for that, as well as there being interconnecting rooms. So that's a person who has a carer with them can stay close by to their carer. In addition as well, to make things easier to in the room to operate, There's assisted curtains, which automatically open and close at the touch of a button, which is positioned next to the bed. And also the switches are positioned so that are kind of designed so that they can be operated with a closed fist or palm of a hand. So if someone does have limited dexterity, they can easily operate the switches as well. The minibar, so this is a really helpful feature, because often, for example, a safe can be positioned out of reach or the minibar too low. Here, consideration of reach heights has been thought about, so that someone can operate the safe, can use the minibar in a seated position. So whether they're in a wheelchair or they generally prefer to sit to carry out tasks. As well as including a height adjustable clothes rail, because not everybody can reach up high, and some people of shorter stature may prefer a lower height clothes rail as well. And then this is a really interesting feature of the hotel, and it's amazing to see this been included. But a hoist within the bedroom, which can help assist somebody to get in and out of bed. Which cleverly hides away in the joinery so that it doesn't have to kind of be on show at all times. And this is a really nice feature as well, because it means that someone who's arriving who doesn't necessarily need the hoist, if it can be hidden away and it doesn't have to be kind of presented at all times. And there's a really nice feature as well, that there's a lighting LED strip that appears on the ceiling when the hoist is retracted. So it becomes like a nice design feature as well. And then finally in the bathroom, so something that's really helpful about Hotel Brooklyn as well is that prior to a guest arriving, the staff will speak to the guest and understand what do they need in the bathroom, how much support do they need, and what can they put in. And so a really nice feature about this space is that the grab bars are removable, so they can be added and taken away when needed. And this kind of communicates to the guests that they've been thought about, and it's a really nice feature. In this space as well, the floors and the walls contrast to create that definition of space. There's additional grab bars which are integrated into the basin, so that someone can pull themselves closer to the basin without it kind of becoming an additional grab bar feature. And the shower controls and everything is set at an accessible height. There's the option of adding or removing a shower seat in there as well. And at this point, I'm going to then hand over to Rebecca, who's going to go into more detail just around the product side.
Thank you, Becky. Good morning, everyone. Yes, so for the next part of this webinar, I'm going to look much more closely at accessible design principles for the sanitary ware facilities. We find that these are the spaces which are often tended to have the biggest challenges in terms of accessible design. But I'm also going to focus on some innovative and well-designed product solutions just to help enhance the look and feel of these types of spaces. So I'm going to start by showing you a couple of recent examples of projects that have been completed, and both are actually residential bathrooms, but I feel not too dissimilar to the design standards that we'd possibly want to achieve within a hotel or a B&B or self-catering holiday let bathroom. So to start with, one of the key features in this room is, of course, the level access shower floor, which we know is a requirement for a wheelchair accessible bathroom. Any type of raised tray or lip is, of course, a barrier for wheelchair access, but actually it's a really helpful principle just for anybody that has an ambulance requirement, or particularly for those that are unsteady on your feet, because any kind of step or lip into the shower can become a trip hazard. And Becky's already mentioned the principles around good colour contrasting, which can really help with visual perception and wayfinding within a bathroom for somebody with a visual impairment or cognitive impairment. And aesthetically, the use of tiles is much preferred above vinyl, and it's just making sure that you're using tiles that meet the right and suitable slip resistant standards. Other good practice product principles that you can see in this particular example is the use of a wall-mounted pan, which can be height adjusted on installation to install the pan at the right height for your guest. So from a wheelchair access point of view, this is a raised height pan. Again, from a product selection point of view, we also try and find pans which are either rimless or have a really clean ceramic look, which is just going to help from a maintenance, cleaning and a sanitation point of view. And indeed, the raised height nature of the pan means it's really easy to pass a mop underneath. Typically, when using flush plates, we see the pneumatic type being used really regularly, and you can tell when you're using a pneumatic flush plate because it's really difficult to depress, which can be difficult and challenging from a manual dexterity point of view. As a general standard good practice principle, we always look to use what's referred to as a mechanical flush plate, which just from an operation point of view is really easy to use in a number of different ways, from a fist, palms, fingers, even sometimes an elbow. Which again just helps make the product really, really easy to use and with minimal force. In this second example, I think what's really clearly demonstrated is the use of an alternative product to a typical, challenge or complaint that we come across when designing accessible bathrooms. That is either the use of a shower curtain or a completely open shower, which we refer to as a wet room. Shower curtains cling to skin. They're not all that effective at retaining water within the shower. And even a standard shower screen, so maybe a big fixed panel or a sliding enclosure of some kind, these can create barriers within the room. So a really popular solution that we're seeing being used in the hospitality sector is the use of a bifolding screen. So you'll see between the two images now that these fold back completely against the wall. Most typically accessible showers measure around 1200 by 1200 millimeters wide. So they're quite big spaces, but where the screens can fold back fully, this helps to maximize circulation space, contributing to a larger wheelchair turning circle, but also, as you can see in this example, just really great transfer access onto both the seat and the toilet where it's positioned here. Basins are a conversation that we have regularly when designing for hotel bathrooms. So typically in accessible loos, you see the tiny hand rinse basin, which serves its purpose. It's really important to have access to running water for a guest that needs access to running water for personal hygiene when using the WC. But from a guest experience in a hotel en-suite point of view, having a larger basin just really helps with tasks such as cleaning your teeth and washing your face. So we try to plan larger basins that are recessed back slightly behind a false wall to allow a larger basin which doesn't compromise on access around the loo. This particular basin uses hand grips, which again, when planned in the right way, is often a permitted alternative to having wall-mounted grab bars on the wall around the basin. We also tend to use basins with a shallow design, which just promotes really great seated access underneath. And a favourite principle of mine in this particular image is also that full height, wide mirror. Something that tends to often get overlooked in the design and specification of mirrors is just that they are sometimes too high or out of reach for somebody that needs to use them from a seated position. Public and communal loos need a permanent or a fixed rail solution, but something that we're seeing as being really popular within the hospitality sector, particularly in guest accessible bedrooms, is removable rails. So in this first image, you can see the walls just with the cover plates in place, and in the second image with the rails fully on. So this is a room that's been fully kitted out in just minutes. So no rails to fully kitted out with rails. And this is just a really easy way to design spaces that can accommodate varying access requirements, a wide demographic of people. And I think what's really nice from a guest personalization point of view is that any accessible room can be very quickly and easily adapted to suit the individual needs of each guest. Some may need more rails, for example, than others. There's a wide range of rail options and finishes to suit every design need. So what you're seeing here is our circular range, which is chrome and metal effect in appearance. However, Most metal rails in certain environments tend to feel and can get quite cold. This is a chrome effect rail. It has an insulated inner core, which means that it's always comfortable to the touch. And again, this could be a nice, I guess, hidden benefit for anybody that may have a particular sensitivity to temperature or variations in temperature. Other finishes available, matte black, or for something less polished, there's satin steel. In this image, you can see options for different shapes. So we have an L-shaped support bar here, which again could just be a more discrete solution to using 2 individual support bars to provide your horizontal and your vertical support, and the different finishes, matte black, for example, to help reach suitable degrees of contrast depending on what wall finishes you're using. Just moving on now, just to the communal facilities. I always like to show this slide in any kind of presentation that I give, because it's exactly the same space, just showing 2 different loos. The first being your classic clinical white plastic grab bars. I think we can all agree the look and feel that we're trying to avoid. And just with a different approach to accessible design and different use of materials, this exact same space can be completely transformed into what I hope you'd agree is a much improved look and feel of an accessible loo. Another common complaint that we also seem to be hearing from a user experience is the call alarm system, which typically is a red pull cord. And the biggest complaint we hear about this particularly is that often these are tied up and left out of reach. So essentially they can't be used by those that need them. Motionspot has redesigned this emergency pull cord system in the form of a button, so an alternative button system. And what this allows to happen is 2 buttons that are installed at different heights, so can be reached from either standing or seating or from the floor, perhaps in the event of a fall. It avoids that problem of having the pull cord tied up out of reach. They're also IP rated for use in the shower, but actually from a hygiene and sanitation point of view, they can be clean. So perhaps this is a topic that's really pertinent in the post-COVID and pandemic era we find ourselves in. Just to finish, again, I think it's really helpful to include this slide from a hospitality point of view, because we're starting to see changing places which are now being designed in complexes that include hotels as well as events and leisure spaces, which I guess are related. For anybody that may not know on the webinar today, a changing places is an enhanced space that has been designed to support those living with complex disabilities, and especially by those that need assistance from a relative or a carer. So enhanced product solutions that you find in these kind of spaces are wash and dry toilets, height adjustable adult changing benches, and a ceiling track hoist, as well as privacy screens and height adjustable basins. And just on a similar theme to the accessible loo that I showed you before, what I hope the image on this slide shows, that even though these spaces need to use more specialist equipment, that with the right mix of products and a different approach to design, these spaces can also be leading in terms of accessible design and lead to that enhanced experience for users, their families and their carers. And then lastly, just to conclude my section really, we've discussed a lot just now about different product innovations that are currently available and being used in projects. Motionspot has recently relaunched our new website earlier this year with a dedicated product section, which just can provide to you and your design team a really detailed library of resources, data sheets, CAD blocks, example floor plans. So please do feel free to use this library of resources for anything you may be planning. But as ever, the Motionspot team is always available to help with any specific queries or questions that you may have. Thank you, everyone. And back over to Ed.
Thanks very much for that, Rebecca. Just before we come on to Q&A, and thank you to those of you who've been asking questions already in the chat, and thank you to Paul. I've seen some responses coming back already. So we'll get to Q&A in just a second, but before we do, I just wanted to look at the benefits of getting it right when it comes to designing accessible hotels. And for so many of us on the call today, we know what the benefits are, and the primary benefit is that inclusive design is just good design. It means that spaces are accessible to everybody. But for so many hotels across the country that are hugely under pressure from a budgetary perspective, particularly after the pandemic, we're often asked the question as to actually, what does this mean from a return on investment perspective if I do get it right? And I just wanted to draw on an example of a hotel we worked on down in Dorking, which is a different size to Paul's Hotel Brooklyn. So this is the White Horse Hotel in Dorking, which is a 18th century coaching inn, which obviously has some access issues because of the historic nature of it. But the general manager there, Becky, really embraced accessibility as part of the refurbishment and engaged Motionspot to design 2 bedrooms and bathrooms for them. And what Becky then did was looked at the performance of those rooms versus the other rooms in her hotel. And the findings were fascinating. Not only were the accessible rooms the most popular rooms within this hotel, not just booked out by disabled people, but when disabled people weren't staying in those rooms, they were so often requested by business people because they liked the large bathroom and the wet room showers. They were often booked out by families who liked the interconnecting rooms. Again, back to that point that this accessible design is good for everybody. But what was really interesting is the GM looked at the performance of these rooms over a 12-month period and worked out that the accessible rooms generated an additional £6,900 of revenue per room versus the standard rooms. And whilst this is only a small data set, we are seeing this trend across the industry. And I'd be really interested to hear from Paul in 12 months' time as to actually what the additional revenue the accessible rooms have potentially brought in for Hotel Brooklyn in over the next 12 months. And what I'd urge hotels to look at doing is to understand the return on investment and communicate that not only internally but across the industry, because it's case studies like this that will really help raise awareness around the benefits of designing accessibly, and ultimately have a society and a set of hotels across our country that are ultimately accessible and beautiful for everybody. Thank you to our speakers, Becky and Rebecca. I'm now going to stop sharing the presentation and move to Q&A, if that's all right. So if you can come back on video and just unmute yourself, that would be great. Thank you. And I'm just going to try and get my head around some of the questions as well. We've had a number of questions come in just in the run-up to this presentation across from LinkedIn and Twitter in particular, which I'm going to start with. But Paul, I wanted to start with you, and we've obviously heard a bit about Hotel Brooklyn from Becky, but it would just be great to hear from you about the hotel. If you could maybe just introduce it and let people know a bit about what's been designed at Brooklyn and what impact it's had on Manchester since you opened.
Yeah, hi everyone. Well, the first thing I want to say about the hotel is that it's open for everybody to come into, which for a hotelier is quite a rare thing. I've looked after some other big hotels, and the issue is always how to be able to look after everybody who comes into the hotel. But Hotel Brooklyn's really easy to achieve that. All the spaces, the bedrooms, it's done in a really sympathetic way that it's enhanced the team development and their understanding of how to look after people. It's put us on a different level, and it's not something that we've learned. We've just developed into a more accommodating hotel where we're confident that anybody who gives us a call, no matter what their challenge is, we don't even call them disabilities or accessibilities, just challenges, be it mental or physical, we're learning ways of being able to do that. And if people communicate that to us prior to arrival, and we're doing some work with a few other companies to achieve that, purely on a communication aspect and through apps, we can do an even better job. And funnily enough, today on TripAdvisor, the top review is from a guest called Chris, who's stayed probably half a dozen times already. He comes with his partner. He's in a wheelchair. There's a couple of guard dogs, and he loves the place. And they keep coming back, and that's part of what it is. It's not difficult for us to look after people who've got challenges, and I think that's the key to it. Because everything's been designed in with regard to being able to look after people. And as hoteliers, that's all you want to do. One, because you want a pretty easy life. If people are happy with the stay, then that's great. But also, two, the confidence that it gives you with, and I mention this all the time, with a group of people where one of them, people within it has got a challenge, maybe they're on a stick or they're in a wheelchair, you're actually looking after the whole group. So you're actually selling 3 or 4 bedrooms just because these people really like what you're doing in your hotel with regard to looking after that one individual. And that's great. It just makes things so easy, and makes us more welcoming and able to look after more people, I suppose. Sorry, I went on there a bit.
Thank you, Paul. No, not at all. It's so nice to hear about it. Obviously, the hotel has got some wonderful access features within it, but as we say, a hotel is only as accessible as the people who operate it. And I'm interested to know what you've done around sort of staff training, so that your staff are confident about kind of responding to the needs of disabled guests.
Yeah, I mean, like most hoteliers, I thought I was quite good at looking after people with accessible needs. But when you go into a hotel where it's all designed into it, it's more about communicating it to the people who are asking you about it. Sometimes when you communicate with you, the communication can be a bit staccato for one reason, or that you go into fine detail about exactly what you've got in terms of your accessible features, which is great. And what that's saying to me is that there's not a lot of what we've got in the industry, because people are so bespoke about, do you have grab rails? Do you have a hoist? One question that comes up, which is on the TripAdvisor review, why isn't there a hoist in the bathroom? And I think I've explained in the reply why it's not necessary, although, if you're going from, I think the hotel in terms of accessibility is a bit like a Rolls Royce, but if it's the Lamborghini version, then you would put a hoist in the bathroom, but you would need more space in the bathroom, I suppose. But it's perfectly acceptable for what we do now, and miles ahead of what the vast majority of hotels do in their properties. But just going back to the people, so by design, hoteliers, a bit like retailers, helping people out in shops, we like to look after people. So, and the last thing we want, because constantly we're looking at how we perform, we want to keep people happy. So in terms of the basic training in a hotel of, check in, check out, make sure everything's right, make sure you get things right for the guest, that's all good, and we all do that. But it's the finer points of it, of understanding how you look after, a family with an autistic child, or somebody with a wheelchair, or somebody who's on sticks, or we've even developed into, understanding people, the challenges with people who are deaf, which might be quite normal in hotels, but if you want to do it really well, you need to get the team to understand it really well. And then, blind guests, and understanding the challenges that they have. And then we've even gone into mental health, which has had a positive impact with the team, because if we're understanding it for the guest needs, then we're enhancing how we develop as a team. We're quite a new team, and we've only been operating, I think, about 34 weeks out of something like 70 because of the lockdown, etc. So that's been really good. And I do think, in terms of my team moving on and going to other hotels, it'll just spread the word, but they'll be able to, operate at a better level, because they have more understanding of people with challenges, I suppose, and what you can do to help people out. And a lot of it, you know, I mean, we've got outstanding accessibility features, absolutely brilliant, but it's also how you work with people and that, and how you help them through their journey, and be able to look after the friends and family involved in that little group. It's really important. Yeah.
Just adding to that, Paul, and thank you. I have to say, I've been to Hotel Brooklyn a number of times, and it is so nice to meet your staff who are, they've become access champions and ambassadors, not just for the hotel, but generally for accessibility in that environment. And what we see across so many other hotels is there's a real willingness from staff to want to do more, but there's a real fear of getting it wrong. And it's that confidence as to actually, you know, how to respond to guests in the right way. Am I saying the right thing? Am I asking the right question? And what you've done is empowered your staff brilliantly, you know, at Brooklyn to be able to offer that service. Just a small point on the hoist, and it's something that's come up quite a lot in questions across social media as to why the hoist isn't in the bathroom. We actually had a team of occupational therapists in Brooklyn 2 weeks ago, and we were discussing the hoist, and the way that our design team has designed the hoist is to pivot someone out of bed into a wheelchair or a mobile shower commode to then access all areas of the bathroom. And what we wanted to do was minimize the length of time someone is elevated above the ground in a hoist from bedroom to bathroom, which is why we've designed it in the way that we have. But it is interesting seeing the feedback that's coming back. And as you said, Paul, like accessible design is never sort of, is never finite. It's always evolving, and you know, we'll take feedback on and potentially look at doing different things for the next Brooklyn development. Just going to some of the questions in the chat, and Paul, one for you here, and I know you've kindly answered it, but just for those that haven't seen the response, a question from Jo Gooding. She asked, what were the key drivers or problems that you faced in getting your management to buy in and invest in inclusive design? Can you share anything around that?
I can, yeah. I've answered it briefly, but in a little bit more detail. I think it's a little bit about being brave. We know there's a huge market out there as hoteliers. It's massive. It's worth £12 billion in the UK alone. And we also know as hoteliers and experts in the field of looking after people and accommodating, that we don't do a particularly good job. And I think part of the issue is retrofit is perceived to cost a fortune. So when you get the opportunity to build from the ground up and plan it ahead, then it just becomes a really encouraging moment. And there's legislation in there, but I think most hotel construction companies will build from the bottom up, so they'll put the minimum in rather than make it an opportunity. But what we have, and Robin will be on this podcast today, and he'll also won't mind me saying, I hope, is that we've got a guy who's got massive amount of experience. He's the president of our company, but he's also got a disability. So it's a little bit like gamekeeper come poacher. He understands all the frustrations in hotels. So when he's had the opportunity to build one from the ground up, he gets probably the industry's best at doing this, which is Motionspot, and starts to put in a level of design that's that accommodates anybody with challenges. And I'm so confident that we do that. We've not had to turn anybody away from Hotel Brooklyn because of we can't look after them, because we can look after anybody. But it's the best part of it is his ability to negotiate with the company, with the people who are investing in the building, to say there's a massive market here. If we get it right, then the world's your oyster. And I know already, because on a Saturday night, for instance, when we're full, there's half a dozen, maybe a dozen wheelchairs in the hotel. And what they don't want to do, people coming in with challenges, is have too much interaction with the staff. Although the staff are great, is they just want to be with their group or their partner and just enjoying the hotel in exactly the same way as everybody else. And that's the beauty of having accessibility built into the hotel, I think, is you're able to look after everybody without an issue, and it builds a level of confidence in the team, because it can be, for the youngsters especially, it can be quite scary when people are coming at you with physical or mental challenges. But our team are really good at it, and the longer and the more we see it, the more confident we get at it, and that's only a good thing. And I do think it's a hotel that'll change the industry of how you look after people.
I'd certainly support that. I'm going to thank you for that, Paul. I'm going to open up the questions to Becky and Rebecca as well. We've had a number coming in, and conscious of time, we're going to just shoot through them quite quickly, if that's all right. Becky, a question for you from Vivian Wool. She asked a question around how can the design principles that we've seen in this presentation be applied to youth hostels, where spaces are typically shared for cheaper accommodation. So where you're designing on a budget, how can they apply in hostels?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think, I mean, a lot of the principles that we talked about throughout the slide can be applied in any area. So they're not just limited to a hotel, which is the beauty of it. And obviously this was tailored towards a hotel, but everything, you know, that we've talked about around circulation, generous circulation, I know that can be kind of more of a, you know, demanding of space, but actually good circulation, ensuring that there is plenty of option. I think the main thing I would always stress is just that there's option, is that option of variety of seating areas, a variety of toilet spaces, a variety of bedroom spaces. Providing that kind of option is really helpful. I also, because I saw your question come in, one of the things I did note down was around generating an idea of what the space contains before someone arrives. So this can be a really simple way of even just taking photos of a space and putting them on the website, or taking a video of the space and showing people what's available, so that when they arrive, they know what to expect. It's a really small feature, but it goes a long way, and it does really build confidence for people with disabilities to come and know what's going to be available for them at the place that they're staying. Because we're obviously not just thinking just about physical disabilities here, we're also thinking about sensory, you know, cognitive impairments, someone with a visual impairment, or you know, someone who is sensitive to busier environments. Things that we can do are yeah, kind of generate an awareness of what to expect, as well as kind of the practical kind of more functional things, such as including an accessible bedroom, with a wet room, ensuring small details like actually getting into the building, that there isn't a threshold as you arrive. So even though the space is accessible, is actually, you know, the entrance, is that even accessible? So just it comes down, I would say, to the small details, but all of the principles that we have talked about today can definitely be expanded into all areas. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Becky. A question for you, Rebecca, around product from anonymous attendee. Are the basins that have vertical integrated cutout handles easy to use? I'm struggling to envisage how these could effectively replace two vertical rails on the wall behind the basin, e.g. to assist part-time wheelchair users to rise and stand at the wash basin.
Thank you so much, and that's a great question. I think if you think back to the image that we showed with this particular example on it, it had the hand grips on the side of the basin. So the basins are available in a number of different designs. So there are basins which have the hand grips at the front, which again could be easier for certain users to use that way, or on the sides if you've got some more clear space around the basin. So I think my answer to that really would be that there are different designs that are available to suit varying needs.
Okay, thank you. We've had a couple of comments and questions in about the use of technology, and great to see Gavin Neat on the call, and thank you for your comments and questions, Gavin. This question is actually from CB, and it is, I think it's probably one for Paul. What's the panel's forecast of the impact of digital and particularly IoT on inclusive design at the front of house guest experience? You mentioned that you were looking at certain digital elements and apps to improve that guest experience. Are you able to share a bit more on that?
Yeah. So we're about to go live with Gavin's welcome app, which basically makes it really easy for guests with challenges to contact the hotel and for us to manage their journey through the hotel, and then afterwards. I mean, that's put really simply, and I probably haven't done justice to what Gavin's doing at present, but that's basically it. And I think the easier you make the journey, the better, and the more confidence it gives the guests, plus it gives the staff as well. The more we know about guests, the better. And I think it was mentioned before, you don't actually, 90% of the time, you don't actually know much about the guest until they walk through the door. So the more we know about people, the better we can look after them as they go through their journey through our hotel.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And just building on, there are other elements of the question that CB asks around are building standards out of date, particularly around technology. And if I was to answer that one, I'd say yes, they most definitely are out of date, because technology is a long way ahead of building standards. But what you've seen with Hotel Brooklyn is actually Brooklyn has pushed the boundaries as to what's possible far and away beyond minimum standards anyway. And you know, when it comes to digital and IoT, I only see you know, advances in those sectors and building standards being changed as a result of it. And CB, you asked the question again, and I know Paul's answered it, just around what is our interpretation of accessibility? You know, is it just the matter of someone getting from A to B within a hotel, or is it getting from A to B in the same way that everyone else does, irrespective of someone's protected characteristics? And I saw Paul's, you know, immediate response to that, which is it's very much the second part of that. For us as inclusive designers, for Paul as an operator of an inclusive hotel, this is not about just designing a space that is accessible, but is asking disabled guests to enter via a different entrance, or have a room that has a completely different quality, look and feel, or an experience that is different, or, you know, accessing services that take more time versus anyone else. It is about designing an experience that is accessible for everybody. Just conscious of time and wanted to sort of begin to draw this to a close. There's a question in here, and I'm just trying to find it, from Jason Slocum. Thank you, Jason. About where do you see the future of accessible hospitality heading? And he says, you know, more around the cognitive, sensory, invisible disabilities piece. Perhaps Becky, if you could answer that one, and Paul, if you could maybe just close on where you see the future of accessible hospitality going, that would be wonderful. Becky.
Great, thanks, Ed. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I was thinking about this one because, and I think following on from what Paul said around empowering staff, I think there is a big part around awareness of disabilities, and ones that are beyond physical disabilities. So I think there's a big, at the moment, generally broadening perspective of different disabilities, that you know, and also going beyond standards. I think there's a real drive for a lot of not just hospitality, but around different sectors that we work with, that we've seen a greater awareness of wanting to go beyond minimum standards and not just tick the boxes. I think where we are ticking boxes, we're not really thinking about everybody. We've had lots of clients that we're working with at the moment who are, you know, amazing for us to hear this as well, but that they are thinking, how can we accommodate people who are neurodiverse, and thinking actually more around sensory aspects of spaces. So from what we're seeing at the moment, and I think this is then going to just kind of you know, transition across all the different industries, but is that there's a general, a greater awareness, and particularly you know, more so around neurodiversity. I think that is becoming a much more regular term in people and designers' vocabulary, and with more research out there and more awareness out there at the moment, I think it's only going to grow. So and I think also probably COVID has helped that. It's given, I think, more permission for people to speak about their personal experience, and given permission to just speak about mental health a lot more as well. I think that it actually, COVID has been a really helpful contributor to people thinking about personal experience and how we can tie accommodating personal needs into design. So I'm hopeful for that.
Thank you. We had a hard stop at midday, which I'm now a minute over on. So Paul, just for a quick 30 seconds, where do you see the future of accessible hospitality?
Well, if you come to Hotel Brooklyn, you come to a multi-award winning hotel with regard to its design and the way guests enjoy it on a world-class level. And you know, I'll just mention, like, that's from an able-bodied perspective. So you got a really hip and trendy hotel. Nothing with regard to accessibility in our hotel, and it's as good as you can get anywhere around the world, in my opinion. Stops us from selling our bedrooms to anybody at all, and that's pretty powerful, because your ROI just doesn't stop based on accessibility. It just stops because your ability to bring guests through the door, and that's pretty powerful. That we're all getting older, the population's getting bigger, we're all becoming more aware of well-being and things like that, and it's the future of hotels. People need to come to Hotel Brooklyn and have a look what's done, because it's done in such a sympathetic way, and in a way that you just turn the bedroom round the next day for any other guest at all, and it's just such a good thing to have, that we can go out to a particular demographic if we want, and grow that business, and do it in a cynical way, or do it in a really sympathetic way. And the way we're doing it is just trying to look after everybody who comes in, and people are delighted with it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Becky and Rebecca, for your input in today's webinar. And thank you to all of you who attended it and asked questions. I'm sorry we haven't been able to get to all of them in the hour, but please take up Paul's offer to come and see Hotel Brooklyn. Motionspot run at least one tour a month at the moment to Manchester as an open hotel tour. So please drop us a line if you'd be interested in seeing the hotel or finding out more about what you've heard today. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank